off. I think we're socially distanced enough for me to do that. I just want to start by saying, first and foremost, our goal here is to make sure we're protecting the First Amendment and free speech rights of every person who comes here to demonstrate near the East Precinct. But we know that we've had some flashpoints near 11th and Pine. So we really are evaluating all of the issues around that and making sure that we are taking into account what we're hearing from the community. Some of those issues are making sure that everything is proportional, that our reactions are proportional to what we're experiencing from the crowd. So we're happy to review that. Part of our force policy is always to make sure that things are reasonable, necessary, and proportionate. That's straight out of our policy, and I think there's really some concern about whether that's happened here, so we're making sure that we review all of that. At the same time, our goal is to make sure that we protect everything that is happening from the First Amendment free speech, also to our facilities and to the officers online as well. As you know, last night, incendiary devices were thrown. Many officers were injured, well, 6 to be exact were injured, 2 were hospitalized. So we don't want to make it a flashpoint where officers are injured or where demonstrators are injured. So we're looking at changing the footprint and the format and the posture of police out here on the scene. We put in a different barricade that is less likely to be moved so that we can establish that barricade with the facilities and not have to keep coming down and addressing as the crowd moves what was the bicycle barricade. Additionally, we've moved all of our resources, most of them off of Pine Street and into our facilities so that there's not a high level of visibility for officers. And we found that people have said that creates some concern with the crowd. They feel like it's very militarized. So we want to move away from that posture and that footprint. And so we've also, because we're concerned about, with the less of a visibility, making sure that we just have the appropriate alternatives in place to make sure that we're able to protect the precinct facility. That means that we're boarding up some of the windows, doing things that we've seen across the country. We have credible information from the FBI that has been vetted that there are groups out there that are intent upon creating violence and attacking police officers and police facilities. We all know that the multiple people that are responding, the many people who are here demonstrating, are not here to do that. But there are small pockets of people who are here for that, and we know that to be true, and we've evaluated and vetted that information. So we're looking at ways that we can minimize risk to everyone involved, but also make sure that we are allowing people to exercise their free speech. My own family has been right here at 11th and Pine, demonstrating and expressing their free speech rights. I want to make sure that everybody who comes is respected and is treated fairly. We also are adding people to de-escalate and help us with our communication with the crowd. Actually having that barrier be a little more sturdy will help with our de-escalation tactics because it allows us to have a little more time and distance and shielding to better respond and really going to modulate those responses. I think the concern that I heard very clearly was that the response was not proportional. And so we just want to make sure that we're being proportional, that we are not, over-responding to whatever threats we're seeing in the crowd. And I think that's really important. We want to develop that posture that we are here to protect people, not to be an occupying force. And I think that we just have to move forward on that. I've talked to a number of people about what to do with the barricades. I've even heard from some members of the community that right now it would not be a good idea to move the barricades just because of the volatility around them, but certainly down the line we'll be looking at ways to do that. Again, it's really important that we're protecting everybody's First Amendment free speech. We do have to balance that with bad actors in the crowd and find ways that we can minimize the negative impacts that they're having, not only on the police officers in the facility, but on all of the demonstrators who are just here to express themselves and don't want to have acts of violence. So with that, I'll take any questions if you have any.
Chief, do you think that the police response was not proportionate to what was happening?
I think that all of it, I know that all of it will be under review. I think there's a lot of varying opinions about that, so we need to have a little space to make sure we review every single issue and incident that occurred. But certainly it's something we've talked about with the commanders and the command staff, and we're going to really make sure that we're focusing on modulating our responses.
When you talk about de-escalate, are you going to have different officers come in who are specialized in that, or what does that look
Well,
like?
what we're looking at is some officers on the line, but certainly I think the best would be to have community people that are trusted, verified folks who can talk to people in the crowd and help minimize some of the one-on-one contacts that can become troubling. So we're working with a number of folks to see who we can have come out and assist us in that endeavor. Again, we really want to make sure that things stay peaceful and that we're not, in any way, even intentionally or unintentionally, escalating things.
We heard that tear gas wasn't going to be used, but we also heard that OC canister were used.
Yeah, so I think there's a lot of folks who don't understand the difference. I got a lot of emails about you said you weren't going to use tear gas, and we didn't. But there is a pepper spray, which is basically OC. It's a pepper spray that can be used, and additionally flashbangs, which are just devices that create a large noise to sort of disrupt whatever activity is occurring. And so those still are tools that we'll have in our tool belt to use. But ideally, we don't have to use any of that. We really want to meet peace with peace. Peaceful acts by the crowd, and then we can just stay out of the way and allow them to do what they need to do while they're demonstrating.
What's the major difference, Chief, between those OC canisters and the CS spray with regard to how it affects people?
Well, CS spray is a much higher irritant, so we want to make sure that we're working with both public health, best practices. I think that a number of folks have put in some experts, subject matter experts, to make sure that when we are deploying the CS gas, if it's deployed, it's only in a life safety situation, but if that comes to that we make sure that we are doing, operating under best practices.
Chief, what do you need to see before you can start reopening these streets and pulling back the number of police and possibly National Guard who are out here?
Well, we've already started with planning to pull them back, but we just need a couple of nights where there's not the level of impacts for violence and acts of violence from certain people. Let me just be clear about that, for certain people in the crowd. So we would like nothing more than to have peaceful demonstrations tonight with no engagement on the police and people just expressing themselves as they have the constitutional right to do. But we also, again, have to make sure that we modulate that with the protection of the demonstrators, the precincts, and the officers.
How many people were not peaceful in the crowd, do you know, and are they been arrested? Where does that stand?
Well, that's hard to give a specific number. Sometimes the crowd sizes vary, so we know that there could be anywhere from 100 to a couple hundred. So we are making sure that we follow up with any obvious acts of violence. That we have a task force in place ran by our Assistant Chief of Investigations, working with the FBI and the ATF to, with all the footage that we've seen, we'll be identifying people and making sure that we follow up. We've made at least one arrest, I know, from the events last week, but we're continuing to look at all of that footage. And we will take the time to validate and verify who it is that are bad actors, and we will absolutely go after those folks.
Last question.
Do you guys know for sure what was thrown in the direction of Officer yesterday? I know you guys mentioned homemade.
Yeah, it was described to me by our arson bomb unit that they were improvised explosive devices, a wick, like a candle-like material with a wick that was made to explode and cause harm and destruction to the officers, and it did. It did absolutely what it was intended to do.
I know you hear a lot about the officers who are out there today. Can you tell us how those officers are doing and any word on how you're going to ensure the safety of officers?
Yeah, we're doing everything that we can to protect the safety, again, of the demonstrators and the officers. So part of that means removing them from the area as much as possible, minimizing the footprint, trying to keep the temperature down, looking at de-escalation issues so that we can make sure everyone maintains safety. Obviously, these are long hours for people, but it's really important that we provide the safety structure that we have to in place. Life safety, instant stabilization, and protection of property are our goals here, and we want to do that as peacefully as possible.
All right, thank you,
Okay,
folks.
thank you all.
Thank you, Chief.
All right,
Thanks.
thanks, Roger. Take care.